they trust you as an owner or as a manager or whatever, whatever role it is that you play in creating that. But you have to pay the price and put that infrastructure in place. If you don't communicate that and people don't know where they're at, well, when it comes time and, quote unquote, the game's on the line, how much extra effort are they going to do?
This is the PMP Industry Insider Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome out to another episode of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, where we take a look at what is changing in the pest and lawn industries, and we take you to the front lines, to those that are driving those changes. I'm Donnie Shelton, owner of Triangle Home Services, which has Triangle Pest as well as Triangle Lawn. And with me is the notorious Mr. Dan Gordon. Dan, would you like to say good afternoon? We're recording this afternoon. Introduce yourself, our sponsors, talk a little bit about the peer groups, because we always do, and then our topic.
Sure. So good afternoon, Dan Gordon, PCO M&A specialist, PCO bookkeepers, and we are in the accounting and brokerage businesses and blah, blah, blah. Everybody knows what we do. And so, let's talk about our sponsors. So if you're in need of marketing services for the pest or lawn industry, that's Coalmarch. And they do websites, they do non-digital marketing, and right now they're offering the first month free for podcast listeners. Just visit them, coalmarch.com/podcast to claim that offer. And then PestSure, if you're interested in industry-specific insurance, that's auto, workers' comp, general liability, EPLI, that would be pestsure.com. And Voice for Pest, which is a pest management industry leader in designing and implementing unparalleled voice solutions for pest control and lawn care. And their AI solution is pretty cool. You can learn more at voiceforpest.com/podcast. And if you're interested in one of our peer groups, please visit us at pmpindustryinsider.com/peer groups, or go back and listen to episode 136. We had Caleb Cunningham on last week, and he's one of the members of our peer groups, and he gave a little insight into what that looks like. And so if you're interested in that. So today for the topic, just when you thought you had enough MBA buzz terms, we got another one. It's called...
You haven't heard them all.
This is called return on motivation. And it's one of the guys who works with us has been, he writes articles and whatnot, and he's been talking about this. And what I realized is that we've been implementing it for a long time, just, without a name for it. And the return on motivation is a lot more difficult to measure than return on investment, ROI. Return on motivation is the value generated from promoting a motivated and engaged workforce. And it's, it represents total value to an organization that receives by investing in your employees and making them more motivated, you're able to bolster your bottom line as well as your company culture. So I guess I could kind of open this up with some notes that I took. So, and this is so Donnie and I, we don't agree on much, but I think that we're both like, we agree on numbers. We agree on, a lot of the touchy feely stuff. Although Donnie's been coming around the last few years, but it's
so touchy feely.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So, but numbers guys, evolved into modern managers. And like years ago, it was all about headcount, reducing headcount, immediate cost savings, and this touchy-feely stuff never came in, and it was always, geez, touchy-feely, but there's definitely some juice in this stuff. There's many successful or success levers that you can't even quantify, that maybe an accountant or a numbers person doesn't think about. But so while it's not a financial asset on your balance sheet, human capital and the goodwill that your work team has stored. It's a direct result of what your leadership invests in them, and it becomes a very important asset, and it will dictate, success or failure. And so, one of the things, so to, a lot of our episodes, we go on AI and kind of do a little bit of research. And one of the things that I came up with is the difference between compliance and commitment, right? Because in order to keep your job, you have to be compliant. In order to excel at your job, you need to have commitment. So a compliant team does what's required, nothing more, nothing less. And a committed team looks for ways to improve, through better services, SOPs. They're the ones who spot a risk before it becomes an issue and suggest something to anticipate that problem and correct it before it happens. So anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about today. How's that?
I don't know. I would not characterize it as touchy-feely. I would characterize it as culture.
Hmm.
But I would also say, this whole idea between a compliant team and a committed team. If you're listening, I'm sure you have experienced this. Let's look at a compliant team as maybe visiting the DMV. Let's look at a committed team as maybe going to Disney, right? Or going somewhere where, the team is actually motivated. And, you're right, Dan. There's really no way of directly measuring this, but I almost put this as training is that everything measures it. So when you're looking at your numbers, if you have a team that is compliant, and of course that usually is that team, when you see a compliant team that's not committed, oftentimes not oftentimes, every time it's a function of leadership or lack thereof. Um, it's very easy in the corporate world and in the small business world, if you're the owner, to get compliance. It's called authority, right? I mean, all you got to do is be like, well, your job's on the line or whatever, and you will get compliance, especially if there's limited options, right? If someone um, doesn't have a lot of other opportunities as far as finding another job or whatever, or you'll get compliance until something else pops up. And so you're never going to get 100%, out of a compliant team because they are motivated by usually fear and authority, which is the complete opposite of a committed team, which is where they're motivated by more than just, fear and authority. And so, the reality of it is that, different things motivate different people. And there's absolutely a time that you need to play the authority card, but it should be like extremely rare.
Yeah.
If you are like constantly, you know, and I mean, I go back to the military because I grew up in the military, which is you're constantly throwing the rank card, you're constantly throwing the authority card. Usually that's a good sign that you have some development to do as a leader. And listen, I don't want anyone to listen to this and think that I have this all figured out because I will tell you years ago I had a compliant team and I'm not making excuses, right? I mean, I came from the military. That was kind of how it ran. But not really. It did early on, but when I was flying and we had a bunch of pilots together, like it wasn't like, you know, the chief pilot would walk in and be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get your button." Like it never happened, right? I mean, so anyway, so there is a big difference between that, and I think it's probably I think for our listeners, if you're just for a moment listening to this episode and you're like, I wonder what kind of team I have, is this really worth it? I will tell you that this is something that I have been working on indirectly. I haven't necessarily formulated it this way, but I've certainly been a big fan of working on our culture. I think I've talked about it on this podcast. It was one of the big things I love about Traction is because it actually showed me how to create an ideal culture. It had a whole chapter on it because people toss around that term all the time. And I mean, at least for me, it kind of fell on deaf ears. I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking. I can't even define culture. And now, I feel like we've not only got a handle on it, we're actively trying to create a committed team and a motivated team versus a compliant team. And so anyway, I'm sure we're going to share many, many examples, but
Yeah, I
let's
mean, you know what's really interesting? You brought up Department of Motor Vehicles. So, and one of the things that you always kick fun is that I live half a year in New Jersey and half a year in Florida. Well, when you go to the New Jersey DMV, The people there just look at you with disdain. If they could kill you with their eyes, they would. For whatever reason, and I have no idea what they do in Florida, you go to DMV and it's a very pleasurable experience. You go in there, they're very organized, they're willing to help, they get you in and out of there. And it's definitely starts with leadership, but those are two of the exact same businesses, and
Mhm.
from the top, it's totally different. So that's kind of interesting.
So let's pull it back here. If you're an owner, like why even bother, right? What is, this whole idea that we talk about compliance versus commitment, we talk about looking at return on motivation, trying to think about how motivated is my team. And by the way, I am one that if you hear me talk about motivation in and of itself, um, I'm probably not going to be very positive on it. I'm more for like purpose, but it's kind of going. I think in this context, it's kind of saying the same thing. Um, and so when we think about money and the reality of why is this a good idea, um, I think the very first thing to think about, and I can say from our own experience, when people are all in, like they truly believe in what you're doing, um, I mean, there is no doubt that people will put out more in terms of productivity. Um, Now, do I go out and measure this? I don't know. I mean, could I stop and be like, okay, we started here and now we're here, and this is a direct result of a speech I gave on, this date. I don't know that I can do that. And in the past, I've really struggled with this. It's not like I've sat down and said, oh, yeah, this number, my customer experience went up by this percent. But when I said it's everything, it's almost like training. You ever notice like training, you can never really measure the impact to one specific number, but you see it in all numbers in small ways. So you'll see it in like if you train I mean, let's just use the very standard example, which would be like your PMPs. If you have a very, very good training program, they're going to have very little warranty services. They're going to have high customer experience. They're going to have good reviews. You know what I mean? Like all the numbers are going to be in the slot. And that's a direct result of their training. Although you can't tie that back in. I would say that return on motivation, and I would say talking through providing people purpose outside of, well, you'll lose your job or I'm going to do, that's going to be kind of the same thing. You're going to see better productivity. You should see less employee turnover. You should see less sick people. When I say sick people, I'm not talking about like they're mentally ill. I'm talking about like as far as absenteeism, or people leaving early or taking fewer 6 days. And then the last one, which I think is probably the most important, which is they are very, very good with your customers. And the reason is because it's like, I mean, people are people. If I'm having a bad day, even without me saying it, you're probably gonna know it, you
Yeah. Yeah.
know? And so if I'm having a bad day and I'm interacting with, you know, your customers, I mean, it's gonna rub off, even if I'm trying to hide it. And so, the reality of it is that this is something that I would say very difficult to measure and very easy to see. And I mean, in the past, I've said, well, you can just, you can kind of feel it in the company. Um, and I would say even in individuals, I mean, listen, I don't know if you've ever had this happen, Dan, and I'm being a little facetious when I say this, but you ever notice that you see someone, you're like, they're not lasting very much longer.
Well,
You know what I'm saying? Like you can tell by the way they look, the way they interact, the way that like you're like,
they don't show up the way.
yeah, you're like, I don't think this is gonna last very much longer, right? I mean, it's so easy to see, but it's that's I mean, how do you quantify that? You're like, well, they looked at me differently. You know what I'm saying?
So it's interesting because you say, like in finance books, basic finance books, the reason for a company's being is to maximize shareholder value. And that sounds very greedy, right?
Right.
But so if you want to force people to maximize the value, maybe you do and maybe you don't. But if you want to, feed them full of motivation so they do all the things that you suggested, you will see it in the bottom line. Your turnover will be less, your customer churn will be less, and so you can see it in the financial statements. But you're right, you can't just measure it. Say this number increasing or decreasing as a result of this action. You can't do it, but you definitely, as a body of work, you can definitely see it.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about how you do this. And I mean, I know we've got an outline here, and
Mhm.
I'm just looking through, all the, and we listen. By the way, we can post this outline if you're listening to this and you want a copy of it. It's not a big deal. Or you can do what I'm getting ready to tell you, which is what I just, as I was reading this, I was thinking, well, this is just traction. Right? I'm looking at it, and one of the first things it says, okay, well, clear and consistent communication. Obviously, that's a huge thing. And I mean, not just like, hey, how are you doing? But, this is how the company's doing. Here's where we're going, full transparency, because then people feel like, it's almost like if you're playing a game, but you don't know where you're at in the game. I mean, I know I've used this example several times on the podcast, but it's totally true. I used to work for a power company here in Raleigh, and I was still in college. I got hired in college, and I remember one year I get like this $3,000 bonus. It's like we hit our goals, and I'm like, oh, we had goals. I had no idea. Um, and listen, I'm not saying I'm not grateful for that, but I remember I got the bonus, and I was like, this is great.
Yeah, but
And
how do you do it again? You don't know.
exactly. I had no idea that we even had goals and that we were driving to get them. And then here we are, I mean, again, so my point here is that, most people will respond to playing a game, but you've got to create it. And the way to create it is that you got to communicate what it is. You have to teach people what it is. When I say teach people, I mean actually teach them about business, teach them what it is that you're trying to accomplish it, and not just making money. I put money akin to breathing, right? Okay, so yes, in order to live, I've got to breathe. But once I've got that one figured out, I mean, that's not the purpose of my life. And so I would say the same thing in the business. Of course, you've got to make profit. Of course, you've got to have security. Of course, you have to have all the fundamentals, but that's not the purpose of the business, right? And so articulating that very, very clearly, communicating it often, talking about the mission, talking about the values, and then more importantly, and I think this is probably the most important part, is communicating performance, both as a business and then as a team and then as an individual. And those things are hard to do. But once you're able to do that and you've got that clear and consistent communication, now all of a sudden people are starting to feel a more of a sense of ownership of performance. They're starting to feel like, hey, yeah, this is the game that I'm playing. I know what's going on. I know my place. And the people who are running the boat here know what they're doing. Like they trust you as an owner or as a manager or whatever, whatever role it is that you play in creating that. But you have to pay the price and put that infrastructure in place. If you don't communicate that and people don't know where they're at, well, when it comes time and, quote unquote, the game's on the line, how much extra effort are they going to do?
Right.
Right. If they don't know that, oh my gosh, we're, I don't know, $1,000 from hitting our revenue goal for the month, they're going to push really, really hard because, we have this innate, at least I think, we have this innate desire to win. And so if people aren't clear on like what winning means and it's not constantly communicated to them, and again, I'm talking more than just money here. Um,
Mhm.
it's going to be very difficult for them to be motivated, right? It's going to be very difficult for them to understand how this all comes together. And ultimately what that turns into is either mediocrity because there's no if no one cares, well then no one cares, right? So it's going to either turn into mediocrity or it's going to turn in just like, non-clarity, which is where I don't know what I do, how what I do contributes at all to the game. So what's even the point, right? So all right.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of this stuff is intangible, what we're talking about, and it sounds great in theory, but okay, what is it that you're doing to motivate? What is it? How does it?
Yeah.
So the first thing I think you need to do is to say, okay, well, what am I going to do, and what's it going to cost, right? So now we're getting back to the numbers. So, if you have costs of rewards or recognitions or training programs or team building events, what does that cost? Okay. And so if, the examples I just gave, that's an example of, juicing or getting your team excited, who are your production, your frontline people. So you can measure the increased productivity through either, their route utilization, the dollars that they bring in per day. How many, are they willing to take that extra stop? Or are they coming home? That kind of thing. So the first thing you have to do is identify the cost. And second, you have to measure the benefits of what you just put in. So that would be, increased productivity, hopefully, or, less employee turnover, more customer reviews, as you said, that kind of thing.
Well, and putting this in, I call it tractionese around here, but putting it in tractionese, there's six components of EOS, and the very first one is vision, right? And the idea behind vision is that you have this what's called a VTO, which is a vision traction organizer, and the whole idea behind that is that everyone in the company is 100% clear and 100% on the same page about this is where we're going, and here's how we're going to get there, and here's our plan for 3 years, here's our plan for 1 year, and here's our plan for this quarter. And they're clear on company values, they're clear on what the focus is. And so that clarity, I can't tell you how many places I've worked at prior to Triangle, of course, and maybe even some time while we've been at Triangle, where that is all fuzzy. And you know what? You ask someone and no one really knows. They're like, make money. And even now, like with all the stuff that we do now, we just had our last state of the company and asked this question about vision. And I still got some answers that I was like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like we talk about this all the time. And I'm not being critical of my people. I'm making the point that this is something that you constantly, especially as an owner or as a leader, you can never communicate it enough, right? And so anyway, that's the first component: clear and consistent communication, and specifically about your vision. What your core values are, what your focus is, and then what you're going to do and how you're going to get there. That is such a key part of motivation, because now all of a sudden people have something that they're driving towards, and everyone loves winning. And so now you've created a game that where people can win and know if they're winning. So, all right, you want to talk about the second
So,
one?
yeah, sure. So go ahead.
Well, okay. So the next one is goal alignment,
Hmm.
and clarity. Now, um, you talked about how we've evolved. I guess you would call it evolving. Maybe I've devolved. I don't know. But I'm a very different leader now
Yeah.
now than I was 10 years ago. Would you agree with that, Dan? You've known me for over 10 years.
Yeah, I've known you for quite a while, but
Yeah.
how about just take a second and talk about your military experience, right? So, well, no, that's interesting. Like, if
Yes. So to Dan's point,
your life is on the line, are you going to give touchy-feely type things, or are you going to
well,
give
there are times, So listen, I went in the military when I was 17. I started as an enlisted guy. I got out, went back to school, went to state, and went back in as an officer, and I flew until I retired. Right. And to your point, Dan, for me, when I came from military to civilian, it was a big adjustment. And I think the reason is because in the military, authority is a big thing, right? And rank is very clear. And from boot camp or officer training school, you're taught to understand orders, obey them, and follow them to the best of your ability, right? And it doesn't mean that we're all a bunch of blind folks and we just do as we're told. There are times that things were explained, but there are also times, much like what you described, which is where, like, you know what, you're not a captain, and I am, so you need to do this right now, and it's like, yep, Roger that. That's what I'm going to go do, and you'd go do that. So when I came over to the civilian side, you can imagine how well
Roger
that
that?
went. The first few years, I really struggled because, I'm like, I just told you to do that. Like, what's the problem? Like, I don't want to, and I mean, every now and then I would explain it. But long story short, and again, I want to be careful as I say this because I'm not the best leader in the world. I'm still learning just like everyone else, and I don't know anything. But I will say, um, you know, understanding and getting folks to and buy into what it is that you're trying to accomplish and being super clear without having to go to this whole idea of authority, right? Like doing it because it's the right thing to do. And what I would add to this is that tying it back to what how does it benefit them for them to win, like, you know what I mean? Like, one of the things I really try to make sure that I hammer down now that it's a little different is how you winning and the business winning helps us win in the long term. And going back to Traction Ease, on the VTO, it has you paint this picture of what the company is going to look like in 3 years and 5 years and, yada, yada, yada. And I will tell you, when I write like what that company looks like, I write it in a sense where when someone on my staff reads it, understands that if we hit our goals, this is how the company is going to reinvest into me, right? So we talk about benefits, we talk about, I mean, just a ton of stuff. The building that you obviously, Dan, you've seen it, but the building was one of the things that we had on there. And so just making that connection back to, this is how this benefits me. This is how winning benefits me personally. Because if you can do that, now you got real alignment, right? I mean, because ultimately, listen, this is not me being um, cynical. This is not me being, dark, but people respond to incentives, period, dot. There is no, you know what I'm saying? They really do. And so if you can take the time to really think through how, when someone's working for you, if they win, then the business wins. And if the business wins, then they win. And you can make those the same, then now you've got something. And now you've got people on the same page, and you've been able to get alignment. And the other part of that is making that line clear. Another one that I look at quite a bit. Have you ever read Jack Stack's,
Yeah.
Great Game of Business?
Yeah.
And there's another book called Get in the Game that he has, and they talk about line of sight, and this concept is so simple, and yet it's so hard and so easy to overlook. And the whole idea behind a line of sight principle is that this, and they use factory examples. Let's just use it in pest control of lawn care. By me servicing this lawn, this is the line of sight that shows how the company reaches its goal. And by the company reaching its goal, here's the line of sight of how it comes back to me and benefits me. And so that alignment and clarity, it's extremely difficult to do. It's hard to communicate, but
Hmm.
but if you can get that right, now all of a sudden you got, I don't want to say you got to, people they take it to the extreme. They go, oh, you got all owners and blah blah blah. Well, I don't know if you have all of that, but you certainly have clarity. You've got alignment, which a lot of companies don't have. I mean, you look at the DMV, for example, going back to that example. Tell me what incentive the DMV has for customer service.
There's none. There's
And
none.
because of that misalignment, at least in North Carolina,
Yeah.
I
And
can
New
tell you what
Jersey.
you get. You
Right.
don't get great customer service. And so that's a really key part of that alignment and clarity. So, um, okay, should we move on to the next one?
Yeah. So let's talk about recognition and appreciation. And this is kind of an interesting one because when the way that we used to look at headcount, up or down, whatever, um, it didn't matter about acknowledging people.
Mhm.
But this is one of those things, and I never, my younger days, I never believed that money wasn't the sole motivator, but it's not. It
Mhm.
really isn't. Listen, everybody's got to make a living. Everybody's got to, pay their mortgage, do whatever, but it's not the end all. And that was a big lesson that I learned. But rewarding employees for hard work, dedication, um, public recognition. Yesterday, we took the whole day off, and we half of us played golf at this resort. The other half, the company went to a spa, and then we all got together for lunch, and we had a presentation on what the last year looked like and what the next year is going to look like. And Brian Post, my partner, he did a couple of spotlights on a couple of employees. And I didn't know he was going to do it, and they didn't know he was going to do it. You should have seen these people, the beaming smiles, just that
Yeah.
you recognize them in front of the whole company, and it was really pretty cool. So that's my most
All
recent
right.
story in
So
recognition.
I have some advice on this one. And Dan, you're without even knowing it, you're already plugging into this, which is this. I really suck at this. Like I am so bad at recognition. I'm not so much at I mean appreciation I'm usually pretty good at, but it's easy for me, and I think most entrepreneurs are this way. And I want to be careful on how I say that. But listen, if you're sitting in a CEO seat or you're a business owner, you're almost always 5 years out, at least a year out, hopefully, right? Because that's kind of your job. That's what you do. And so when I come back, like I'm out there 5 years, and of course, the music's playing. millions of dollars. I mean, like everything's perfect, right? I mean, I'm just having such a great time. And then I come back and I look at my reality today.
Yeah, it's
Just
not so
like,
bad. It's
this
not so bad.
sucks. Like, yeah, we got this to fix. This is wrong. Yada yada yada. And you deal with problems almost every single day, right? And so what happens is that, and I really do believe that this is a function of structure, not necessarily a personality. It says nothing like you're a bad person or anything like that. It's just where you spend most of your time. And so what that turns in for me is I forget, right? I'm like, oh yeah, 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 such such doing a great job. And listen, I appreciate that, but I forget to recognize them because I don't want to say it's not important because listen, I've gotten awards before. I've gotten awards in the industry and I was very grateful and gracious, of course. And it does mean something to get recognized in front of your peers. But at the same time, it's not something I'm very good at. So anyway, getting back to the little tidbit, or at least the nugget I have learned, is I have people on my staff now that this is what they do, and so I basically hired this out.
So,
you know,
so you outsourced
I outsourced
recognition
it. Now I don't
and
appreciation.
appreciation.
I
Yeah.
didn't do that. Now listen, I even, for me personally, and I've talked about win the day, and I'm not going to go into that whole thing, but there's actually a thing on there every week. I make sure that I show appreciation to folks in my family. I show appreciation to my leadership staff because those are ones that are directly working with me. But going back to like in again going back to Tractionees, they put this in the hands of the manager, right? The manager they get a budget that's super cheap. We don't put a ton of money into it, but man, to your point, Dan, I mean, it's such a powerful motivator because people want to know that they matter, and I mean, they should, of course. It's not like we don't care, and recognizing them in front of their peers, it means a lot. And so, yeah, I know that sounds. Um,
No, I watched it firsthand yesterday, and it was
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. It's like, and you always forget, at least I do. Like, yeah, I come back to it and I'm like, man, we need to be doing this more often. Like when we do it. And um, so anyway, my point
Because
to,
we got
if
to
you're
get some
listening
work
to,
done.
yeah, if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I really suck at that. Like I do, and I still suck at it. I would say get some folks on your staff and look, you can even offload this to your manager. If you don't have a manager and you got a lead, give it to them. And if you don't have any of those, then find someone, right? I mean, find someone that'll help you do this because, again, I just think structurally, the mindset of an entrepreneur, the mindset of an owner, since you spend so much time out there, it's kind of difficult to look back. And I'm not making an excuse. And listen, if you think I'm completely wrong, I probably am. But in any case,
I
for
know
me,
it's
it is
yeah,
it's a hard
and
thing
by
to
the
do.
way, I was hoping you were getting there. I think you were. Is if you're going to outsource it, quote unquote, that outsourcing should include somebody making observations and then reporting to you so that you can do it because you
Right.
forget to do it.
That's
And
right.
coming from somebody, directly in line with them, yeah, that's nice. But coming from the leader,
Correct.
that's a big
Yep.
deal. So, next one is empowerment and autonomy, and this is kind of interesting. And it's something that is in my life has been evolving is like being able to just delegate and not be a control freak and
Oh
watching
gosh.
watching it happen, and it might not be exactly the way you would do it, but watching them succeed and many times succeed better than what you would do. So granting employees or team members a degree of autonomy, and
I
giving them ownership,
so
it's
you want to hear something funny?
yeah.
It's actually not funny, but it is funny. I am guilty of screwing this up. Like as of late. Like no, a couple of weeks ago, screwing this up. I have a quick story. Um, so so if you are first gen, and maybe even second gen, I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter, right? But if you've grown up in the business as an operator, chances are you know how to run a team. Chances are you probably know how to run a branch, and you've done it before, and you've made it successful, and right. And so we had a situation here at Triangle, and we were having a problem, of course. And I'm really patient, especially when we're bleeding, right? Now I say we're bleeding, like we were, our cancel rate was higher than what it should have been. And man, I jumped right in, total operator mode. We're gonna do this training here, blah blah blah. Like I just completely jumped in, and I don't know, like I kind of felt weird over the weekend, and then I started journaling about it, and I'm like, dude, this is really stupid. Like, what are you doing? And so bringing it back to empowerment and autonomy, the critical skill here, which is, at least it was difficult for me, and you kind of said it too, Dan, which is being a control freak, is not to be the operator, right? And when I say not to be the operator, it's like, here are the requirements that it needs to meet. Now you tell me your plan and however you
Right.
want to
So
get there.
asking questions instead of telling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what I did is I went back to my leadership team and I did a presentation and I walked through what I did, why that was wrong, and how they should not do the same thing. And I went back and I said, now this is what I need to see. And I had a
They call
presentation
you
to make.
sap or what?
No, they didn't call me a sap. They said, well, we were not expecting this.
When you
I
said
was
everyone
like,
get together, we thought we were losing our jobs. So
they thought I was going to tell them a new program, a new way of how to do it. But my point here is that this is one. It's, yeah, man, empowerment, sure, no problem. I mean, yeah, of course they want to be autonomous. Yeah, we want them to. But when the stuff's really going, it just takes a great amount of discipline, especially if you have the personality that I have, and I'm not making excuses, and maybe even, I mean, Dan, he's pretty elevated, so probably not him. He's never struggled with this, but for me personally, I have, and even to this day, like I have to remind myself, like, you know what, I'm going to give them requirements. I'm going to let them make the plan, and I'm not going to give them like this is going to kill the company kind of plan. Now, I'm going to be involved in that one, but there's a lot of things I don't necessarily need. Like you said, if they're going to do it a different way, and they understand the requirements, and it's going to get there, great plan, right? That's awesome. That's exactly
yeah.
what you should be doing. So we're getting close to being
Yeah,
done here,
well,
Dan. We
next
got to
one. This
finish
one is
up.
an interesting one, right? So investment, yeah, we are getting close, but investment in growth and development. And this is real interesting because way back when I was working for a pest control company that, and we were pretty good and I think pretty ahead of most in the industry with regard to, what we're talking about. The technicians, we would pay for if they wanted to go through the Purdue course and become
Mm-hmm.
a degreed entomologist or board certified, whatever they were offering. But the program was difficult. We didn't have a lot of takers, and those that did, kind of elevated themselves. But in our accounting firm, anybody who comes to us with a bachelor's degree, in order to get a CPA, you've got to have 150 credits, which is just about a master's degree. So we pay for that master's degree. Can I tell you that we've had probably a dozen people go through the program that we've paid for? And you say, geez, that's really expensive because it is expensive. It's, probably like $25,000, $30,000. We've made more than that, just for the investment. Now we have, most of our staff are CPAs. Most of them love working with us because, we were able to give that to them. And it gives us time while they're studying for all of this to determine whether they like us and we like them. But, if you're willing to put that money or those resources into educating, and don't be afraid that you're going to lose them because you may, you know, I mean, the best companies are people who left a company that was doing the same thing because they thought they could do it better. That you should be flattered by that, right? That
Well,
you
it's, I think it was Henry Ford that said it's better you train them than leave than not train them and they stay.
right, right.
Yeah,
That's
it's such a
terrific.
great quote. But
Yeah.
but going back to your point, um, this is one that I have struggled with in the sense of it's kind of all over the place, and you want to be intentional. Like in your case, using it for career development, I think is spot on, and that's exactly how we do it. We require all of our technicians to be certified, and I know in different states I'm going to say that it's going to have different ramifications depending on where you're at. But North Carolina, there's registered technician, there's certified applicator, and then there's a licensee, so it's kind of the mid-level. And we require all of them to get there. So and we invest in that, right? It takes time. There's training involved. There's testing involved. Those types of things. But don't get fooled. In his book Good to Great, Jim Collins, there's a whole chapter. He said, the right people don't need self development. Do you remember reading that in that? But do you remember reading that book, Good to
I
Great? He talks.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you remember him saying that? He's like, the
Yeah.
right people don't need all these employee development programs. They don't need all these motivators. Like they're self motivated. And to his point, I really struggled with this back and forth year after year. And by the way, I'm not telling you that my opinion's right. I'm only sharing my opinion. What I have learned is you want to get healthy, you want to like have better relationships, you want to have a better life, you go do that. My role as an owner, if I can help you do that, I'm happy to do that. But I'm not when we talk about investment in growth and development, that's not what I think that's what Jim Collins was talking about. I don't want to speak for him. Now, investment in growth and development, now, if it's professional training, I am 100% in. And the reason I say that is because I did the other and I failed. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like if you're helping people, lose weight or you're helping them, get more money or whatever, that is a completely different thing than I'm helping them become better professionally. And so when we talk about investment in growth and development, what I have found that works for us, and again, I'm not telling you that I'm giving you my opinion at this point, it's professional development and things that would help them in their career. I would not go down the path of, we're going to live our dreams. And listen, there are some companies that do that and they do it well and they find a
right.
way to
No,
make
there's
it work. But
companies that tell you how to run your
right,
finances and your
right.
leverage. And
And if you
no,
can
no,
do
no,
that
that's
and it
none of your
works,
damn business.
I mean, well, listen, again, if it works, great. But
Yeah.
going back to the whole Jim Collins and good to great, and if someone can look it up, I mean, listen, I remember reading it because I was like, it flew in the face of what I'd been doing, um, which wasn't quite working. But
Well, I mean, I think there are some people who come to your company and are from backgrounds that don't even know this kind of activity is available. So you have to show them, you know, that people when you show them that you care, and then you show them how to develop people. But if they don't want any part of it, then you don't chase it. But
right.
there are definitely people who, when they come to this kind of environment, it's totally different than they've ever seen, like you being in the military. You come out and somebody,
Hmm.
is nice to you and you say, well, what's he want? Why is he being nice to me?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah,
We're getting towards the end here, so let me
yeah,
just close this out here. There's one more, which is fair and competitive compensation. I think this one is probably the easiest to fix. The thing I would say is that the things I would say to be careful about are, number one, you need to know what that really means. And I mean that from the sense of too low and too high. And the way to do that is to, get comps on that position. There's definitely ways that you can go out there and figure out what the median salary is for that. And that changes. So if you're thinking, man, an average tech should be making, I don't know, 32,000. I'm not throwing out numbers here. I'm just, and the market has changed and know the new number is 45. You just need to be able to benchmark positions, have a system in place where you benchmark and you understand what fair and competitive compensation means, because the biggest issue I see with folks failing on this one is that they don't know what that means, or they've had someone there who's been there a really, really long time and they really, really like them and they're grossly overpaid because they're trying to make compensation, um, that position doesn't pull that kind of compensation. And this usually turns into an issue, and I'm sure you've seen this, Dan, in M&A, right?
absolutely.
They roll in,
Got
they're
that,
like,
you
what are
got
you
that
talking about?
technician
That
who's making 150,000.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but he
There's no.
doesn't, he takes all the
Yeah.
problems away from you.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that,
So my point here is that, as far as return on motivation, you just need to know what fair and competitive compensation means. And if someone needs to make more money, but it's not fair and competitive, you say, well, listen, we need to find another seat where I can help you to succeed and help you make what is fair and competitive for that seat. Because listen, I mean, I don't know too many PMPs that are going to be making 300 grand a year. That position just does not pull that. So that's just a key part. So, all right, things that people get wrong: fostering a toxic culture, right? Meaning that you allow negative behaviors like people who are bullying, or they blame folks, they don't take accountability, those types of things. Of course, ineffective, poor leadership. We have done that, micromanaging. Don't recognize and appreciate, right? Don't give clear communication. So basically, all the things that we just talked about, think about it in reverse. I've done both. I've been good at some and I've been bad at others at time. I don't know that I'm a full 10 on all of them. I'm certainly some I'm better than in others, but the ways that you get it wrong is by doing the opposite. And so you can basically take everything that we just said and flip it around. And listen, I've ran a company like that before, not by intention, but it's just what happened. Um, and of course, in the end, it just it comes down to this. Going back to where we started, which is where you might get a compliant team, but you're certainly not going to get a committed team, and you certainly won't get a well-performing team at all. you'll just get the DMV. So if the DMV is your level and that's what you like and that's what you want for your company,
By the way, we
knock
don't have
yourself.
anything against
And
it.
by the way, the government doesn't make money. Just want to throw that out there. So
In fact, they lose it, but they're still in business.
that's right. So just to bring it home, just remember, workforce intangibles, if they're managed properly, they absolutely can lead to very tangible results, although you may not be able to take a direct tie to it. Again, this is like training. When you're able to motivate your folks, you're able to lead them well, every number is going to go up. Same thing with training. When you train them well, every number is going to go up. And likewise, if you don't train them, every number is going to go down. And if you don't lead them well, every number is going to go down. Dan, anything to add before we finish out here?
That's it. I think that was very good.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, just a reminder, all the resources and topics that we talked about today are going to be available on the podcast website. Just take a look at pmpindustryinsider.com. Take a look under show notes. And of course, we always appreciate any ratings and reviews that you have. And we ask that all your complaints, complaining in general, Dan loves those comments. He loves to hear that complaining. So just please keep him full, keep his ear full. And other than that, hey, man, it's getting into the fall. So here pretty soon, we're going to be able to see and listen, or like not just listen to, but we'll be able to see some of our listeners at Pest World. And I think we're going to be doing a few special things there with some of our listeners, which we can announce in a future episode. And with that, we're going to sign off. We'll see you all next time. Take care.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye
See ya.
now.